Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment, and this is our second installment of our new series, Guitar Talk, and I'm so glad to have with us today Frank Soda. Welcome back to the show, Frank.
Nice to be back, Tommy.
Always a pleasure, my friend. So, the theme of this series is Guitar Talk, but I want to just do a quick recap of your career, just to remind any of the younger people, maybe who don't know who Frank Soda is. You were born in Italy, and then your family immigrated to BC when you were just a little kid, right? And then before too long, you were winning guitar contests, battles of the bands, and things like that. And when 1973 came along, you were on the train from Vancouver to Toronto to play with Thor. Now, was that always Thor and the Imps?
Well, no, he had his own thing called Thor, and he had a muscle rock sort of a band and that type of idea going, you know. And then when he met us and we backed him up, then that's when he thought of the concept, you know, Thor and the Imps, because we were small, diminutive people, and he was like, you know, tall and built like a bodybuilder, you know. So that's how that came about.
Okay. Now, Thor most famously blew up a hot water bottle on the Merv Griffin show, and he's been pretty well constantly on the go with new recordings and so on. In fact, all these years later, you've been involved in his recent project, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I still, you know, co-write with him and do things off and on and do little tours with him, you know, like whenever it works out for both of us, you know, like sometimes in the States, sometimes in Canada, depending.
Right.
Where his tour is.
Yeah, you're one of those guys who's a friend to a lot of people in the business, that's for sure, and I know you get around. Now, in 78, the Imps went on their own, and then you became really well known for things like blowing up a TV on your head, recording audiences with a head cam, and so on. Now, you guys did an album, was it 1979, that was sponsored by Chum FM?
That's right, Going Down the Tube.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was
at the Piccadilly Tube, recorded live.
Right. Now, perhaps one of your more popular albums, when you were signed with Quality Records, you released Soda Pop in 1980. Now, I noticed on the cover you were playing a beautiful double neck BC Rich guitar.
Yes, that was the double neck BC Bitch, it was called. And it was a beautiful guitar, actually. It was made by like himself, you know, Mr. Rich himself back in the day. And
just for clarification, the Mr. Rich that Frank is referring to here is the founder of BC Rich Guitars, Bernardo Chavez Rico. Now back to Frank.
Fabulous guitar. The sound of the 12 and the 6, just both fabulous. I mean, I love that guitar. I wish I never got rid of it, but it became too heavy for me.
Did it have a mahogany body?
Yeah, it had a mahogany body. It was just beautiful. It was great, too.
What kind of pickups did it have?
I think I put like Jeff Beck DiMarzio pickups in it myself. I think I changed the pickups. But the original pickups it came with were good, too.
Okay. Now, when I first met you way back when in the 70s, you were playing a different BC Rich guitar, and you were kind enough to let me play that during the open mic jam session up in North Bay. And that was
the Mockingbird, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a great sounding guitar as well. Now, I was young enough, so I wouldn't have complained if it was heavy, but I do remember you're known as a seminal rocker in Canada. You've influenced a lot of people, including me. In fact, I took your lesson a little bit too far because you were playing with a heavy set of strings. I don't know what gauge they would have been, but it was a lot heavier than what I was using at the time. And I remember saying to you, after the set, you know, this guitar sounds great, but how do you play with those heavy strings? And you explained to me it was tonality and tunability. And so I thought, well, you do have a great tone, and I didn't have any issues with going out of tune with it. So I started to go heavier and heavier and heavier until eventually I got so heavy with these artist rope core strings that I cracked the neck on my old Epiphone, I think it was a Wiltshire guitar. But yeah, things have really changed since then, and I'm assuming you're not playing with such heavy strings anymore.
No, I don't play with heavy strings, but I'll tell you the reason I did go with the heavier strings back then was that the slinkier strings, I just found that, you know, my hand would just fly over those strings, and they would go out of tune a lot. It would just, I didn't attack my guitar and play the notes the way I wanted to play them out. So the heavier strings forced me to actually play every note. Like when I practiced my scales, I would hit every note like da 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 da, that type of idea. Whereas with the slinkier strings, I would just kind of just sort of fly over them, and just, you put a fuzz on that and you can just play with one hand. You know what I mean? So that's why I put those strings on.
Right. Now, as I recall, you never used to use very many effects, if I'm not mistaken. I think when I played through your rig, you might have just had like a compressor.
Yeah. I basically used the amp to overdrive itself, and then I would back up my volume. That's basically what I did. I think if I had the Marshall 50 watt at that time, that's what I did. I would crank it, and then I would use my volume just to sort of get the sustain out of it. And I would use like a stereo chorus. I had a rolling stereo chorus, and I had a couple of little pedals, like little phase shifters and things like that. But I never used I hated some of the overdrive stuff. It sounded too much like a fuzz tone. You know what I mean? Like it's just too much.
Yeah, I could never really get into any of those old fuzz pedals from back in the day either. I get it.
Yeah, but there's some nice things out there now. I mean, you can just plug in a Line 6 or one of these Kempers and everything else, and you can get all these modular sounds that you want. It's almost like they take a picture of the sound and, and then they just, to me, it still doesn't sound exactly the same, but you can still get the sustain and all that out of those modular sounds.
Right. For me, I think it makes it easier if you're trying to do home recordings, for example, so you don't have to have your neighbors calling the cops on you because you're so loud. Because I agree with the whole idea of just turn your amp up and then roll your volume back on the guitar until it's time for a solo. I don't think there's a more pure way to get tone than that, but you have to have a pretty powerful amp to really do that right.
Yeah, and you have to have the right amp too. I mean, I found some amps that my favorite amp was originally was a Fender Bassman, and I would just crank it all the way, and I put it through like either a Celestian or either 212 Celestian or something like that, and it would just have a beautiful overdrive, just the old Fender. I don't know what it was about that. Yeah.
I had a PV Classic 5410 that I bought back in, I think, late 90s, early 2000s. And my initial impression was this thing is like a direct ripoff of the Fender Bassman. And that's kind of why I bought it.
Yeah, no, they sounded great, sweet. And then my next amp was a 50-watt Marshall. And I tried a bunch of different ones, but this one was just right, And like I say, once again, it didn't, this is technology that didn't have the channels that you could overdrive one channel and all that, you know what I mean, that they have today, you know what I mean, with the different channels, one overdrive, one clean, blah, 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 So I just would crank it up or just get the nice tone that I like with that guitar, and depending on what pickup I was using at the time, mainly like humbuckers, it would just overdrive sweet. And then I would just back it up if I wanted to have a chunk, or sweeten it up with a little stereo chorus or something,
Right, yeah. Now, as I've said earlier, you've done a lot of things over your long and illustrious career. In 1982, you played on Lee Aaron's debut album. You've done so many things, and you had a duo with Terry Watkinson from Max Webster, for example, and you've
Oh, yeah.
been working with David Stone, who played keyboards with Deep Purple for a while. A lot of stuff. You've worked with Loverboy, Bryan Adams, Randy Bachman, Trooper, and so on. I'm curious now, when you got on that train from Vancouver, what guitar did you bring with you back then?
I brought my SG. Yeah, I had a Gibson SG. Beautiful guitar. It was a 60s. It was a 1969 or something. It was an older model, like beautiful guitar. And I loved it too.
Yeah, they're an easy guitar to play, I find, and they're not super heavy and surprisingly toneful for a guitar that, doesn't weigh all that much.
Yeah, no, it was sweet. It was a sweet guitar. And then later I got the Les Paul. That's when I got the Les Paul, and then I ended up getting the Ibanez double neck back then too. That was a nice guitar too. Before I got the BC Bitch. the beautiful mahogany one there. Yeah, it was an Ibanez double neck, and that was pretty good.
Ibanez was famously really good. In fact, I know they got sued successfully by Gibson because their Les Paul was basically a Gibson Les Paul for all intents and purposes. I had an Ibanez SG years ago too, and I really liked that one. Ibanez is very, very underappreciated, I think.
Oh, yeah, no, they were a great company. The competitiveness in the guitar market these days, it's pretty insane, to be honest with you. I mean,
I can't believe I forgot that I have, sitting right behind me, I have an Ibanez AR250 today.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I'm either getting too old or I have too many guitars at this point. I don't know. But yeah, the AR250 is really nice. And I more or less got that because it was almost an exact duplicate of my solid body Gibson 335.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. I still got a couple of Ibanez in my collection. I got one that's very, very light, a super light Ibanez for when I played little pub gigs around here, because it's better for my shoulder and stuff. They're nice. They're nice because they make them very nice.
Very nice warm tone, I find. And this AR250, I had Bill Durst from Thundermug was at my house one day not long ago, and I had him pick that guitar up, and he was just drooling, and he said, man, this thing is a shred machine.
He's another great guitar player. I love Bill Durst.
And he's had one guitar since the 70s. I'm not sure what year his SG is. It would be early 70s. And I think the only thing that he's modified is he put on Pearly Gates pickups.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
He's had that guitar forever. Now he's coming out your way. I think he's on his way west right now.
Is he going to be playing?
Yeah, he's touring with Joe DeAngelis. So Joe was the original lead singer in Thundermug. Now Bill and Joe have been back together writing for years and recording together. And they were touring together for a long time until Joe ran into some back issues and he had to have surgery and so on. But they're back on tour again together as we speak.
Wow, I'd love to see him to come out here. That'd be fabulous.
And Joe is playing bass.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and then as far as guitars go, I like the Strat type of guitars too. You got quite a few Strats type of guitars. I noticed you just got a brand new one made that looks fabulous.
I've had several Strats over the years, and my problem was I was saying this to somebody else recently. I've never been able to buy a Fender guitar right off the rack that was perfect for me. Some of them sounded great, and some of them played great, and very few of them did both. So that's why this time around I thought I have had this love-hate relationship with Fender guitars because I love the Stratocaster tone and what you can get out of it. Back in the old days when you had the three-way switch and you had to kind of jam it into place to get that
out of page.
Yeah. So I love that I've got the 5-way switch and I can just put it in that position, that Mark Knopfler second from the fingerboard position. And for me, I really love the idea. And if I had ever maybe had the opportunity to get like a late 50s or early 60s Stratocaster, I think those were better overall than what the newer ones have been.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Love to get a hold of an older model Strat for sure. But also, I've been using Music Man guitars too. And I really like the way that the Music Man kind of had a sort of a heavier, almost less polished type of feel in a sense, but with that sort of a Fender neck, if you know what I mean, right? The way the Music Man, like the Eddie Van Halen thing. I like that, but it's just a little bit heavy for me now.
Music Man was another Fender, Leo Fender guitar, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Quick editor's note here. Just to clarify, Music Man was a company that started off making hybrid tube solid-state amps that are still popular among collectors today, and at the same time, they were collaborating with CLF Research, which was a Leo Fender-owned operation, and Sterling Ball, who we all know and recognize for Ernie Ball guitar strings. to begin design and production of the original Stingray bass as a CLF product. And the rest was history. So yes, Leo Fender was involved with Music Man, and in fact, the Fender factory was making the instruments back in the day. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, Music Man was related to Fender. I didn't know that.
But I had one of those for a very short time. I had my SG in for repairs, and they gave me a Music Man guitar as a loaner. And I remember this thing it had a metal body with a massive chrome-like pickguard. It was weird because it would catch the light from the cans on stage, and then I could kind of shine it on people like a spotlight. So that was a little impish of me, I guess. I'll never forget that it had this really shiny metal body, and the neck was pretty nice on it as well.
Well, the thing about SGs, my SG guitar would always, if it fell, it cracked that neck like right at the top, and they're known for that, eh? I talked to someone that builds guitars and does stuff, and he says even the SGs, the way that they're built, even if they fall and they break, you can still fix a break, but if it falls again, that glue might hold there, but it'll break at another place. They're just sort of the way they're made. So I had a lot of problems with that. That's why I ended up getting rid of it. If you take care of it, then you should be good to go. But they're known for that,
Yeah. I mean, they've been played by somebody like Frank Zappa played an SG a lot of the time,
Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. Remember him?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. He's still around. I hear he's not doing that great health-wise, and he stopped performing, I think, shortly before COVID hit.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's sad times. We were losing a lot of our guitar heroes these days,
Well, I think some of us are just lucky to be alive after all the things we went through in the days of sex and drugs and rock and roll. And, a lot of guys are still smokers, right? And we talked about, Guy Lafleur just passing today, and he was 70 years old, and he was a very heavy smoker, and he had lung cancer. So there's... We're the lucky ones, that quit smoking and have kept ourselves in pretty good shape, but so many of our peers have not been as fortunate with their lifestyle and their ability to control what they put inside themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But all we can do is just, keep on going, the best we can, and try to take care of ourselves at our age, or at my age anyway.
Yeah, well, you're old enough to be my older brother, but I was going to say, I know you have an acoustic or two. Do you have a preference in acoustic guitars?
Well, to be honest with you, I really like the jumbo one that the jumbo Gibson that the guy from Emerson, Lake and Palmer used to use. That one there?
Yeah, Gibson J200.
A friend of mine has one of those, and I just love the sound of it. Just such a big, beautiful sound, and the neck was just so beautiful. The jumbo Gibson hollow body. Have you ever played one of those?
I had a Gibson Hummingbird that was given to me by an uncle of mine way back in late 60s. And I don't know if that qualifies as jumbo or not, but I was really happy with the sound of that. I don't even remember what happened to it, but yeah. Gibson has had a very good track record with their acoustic guitars, especially their earlier ones.
Yeah, it was a fabulous guitar. It wasn't mine, but I used it for quite a bit of stuff when I was working, and I always loved it. And I can still go over there and use it, to this day. But I also have, I enjoy those Takaminis for the price. They were pretty good back in the day when they were making them. I don't know if you ever played any one of those, the Takaminis?
Yeah, I've had one or two of them in my hands, yeah. And I found they were pretty toneful, and the tuning was pretty reliable on them as well.
Yeah, and then I just ended up getting a Taylor guitar just because I was teaching over there at Long and McQuaid, substituting for a friend of mine who teaches there, and this Taylor guitar came in as a trade-in, and it was just a beautiful guitar. So I just picked it up, and I just sort of strummed a couple of chords and, played a couple of things up and down the neck, and it was just gorgeous guitar. So I couldn't refuse that deal, and I still use that to this day.
Yeah, Taylor is another, I don't know, would you call it a boutique guitar, I guess? Yeah.
like a boutique amp, the amps that they have these days too, man. There's so many cool amps that are out there.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty good friends with a guy who ran a music store here in London for decades. It was a family business that he inherited from his dad. And I remember one time I was in there looking at different guitars, and somebody just bought maybe a high-end Yamaha, and it had Mexican snake wood for the body.
Really?
And I said,
Wow.
wow, like that looks like an expensive guitar. And, they said, yeah, it was like $2,000 or $3,000 for this thing. And he says, and the guy is a doctor. He says, they're our best customers. He said, to be honest with you, guys like you aren't our best customers. It's these dentists, lawyers, and doctors that have more money than what they know what to do with that buy all the boutique stuff.
Well, gee, these days, man, that's $2,000 is relatively almost a low price for a good acoustic. These days, you can get up to like $5,000-$10,000 for some of these guitars out there. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I've had a couple of guitars built for me in the last few years, because it ended up being less expensive than if I'd gone out and bought a high-end Stratocaster or a high-end Telecaster. And again, you get to kind of pick and choose what goes in it. And the Telecaster, man, those things, you can pretty much do anything you want with them. They're basically, it's just such a solid design that if you change the pickups, it's not going to be a big deal,
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's what Jimmy Page used for his early recordings, was just a Telecaster. That's it.
Yeah, a lot of people have no idea, the capabilities that a Telecaster gives you. I mean, it tends to be kind of written off as a jazz or a country guitar by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because you can get that clean chicken picking, that type of sound there and all that. And they got that, that nice, crisp, clean sound, and it just works great. But you can also overdrive them. You can put different pickups on them. Like Jerry Doucette used a Telecaster type of guitar whenever I played with him. He made it sound fabulous. I think he had humbucker pickups on it too. And he's one that used just hardly any pedals, just a Fender Twin, a couple of little pedals, maybe a stereo a little chorus. That's it,
Yeah. Now, on the cover of his best-selling album, Mama Let 'Em Play, it looks like he's playing a double-neck Gibson SG. But after you mentioning his love for the Telecaster, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he actually played a Tele on all of those songs in studio.
Yeah, I don't know. He also had Les Pauls, too, when he first moved up to Vancouver.
Okay.
And so I'm not quite sure.
Well, there's something else about both the Telecaster and the Stratocaster, as they are, for me anyway, they've been more reliable on stage. Like, I played at the Stratford Blues Festival in, I think it was 2017, and it was really hot out, and the sun was just beating down on my forehead. And I started out the show with my Ibanez AR250, but it's basically like a Gibson, and when it's that hot, they go out of tune. So partway through the first song, the sound guys, the roadies, came running up to me to let me know I was out of tune. Well, I grabbed my Telecaster. I had the G&L ASAT Tele, and it was in tune, and it stayed in tune for the rest of our hour-long set. They're just more reliable in that way.
Yeah, I still haven't found a guitar. Like I said, I used to use the, back in the 80s when I was, gigging and touring a lot, I had the Floyd Rose whammy and all that. So you could, but I hated them because, it goes out of tune. It's just, you're sort of always dicking around with it, I always found, those whammies. And then I had a road crew that would maintain and take care of it. I'm terrible at maintaining my own guitars,
I hear you.
I'm not good at it. And, when you hit that chord and it's out of tune and you're trying to tune that string back up, I just hate that, especially when you're at a live gig and, one string is out and you're trying to just sort of reach with your right hand over it and say, is it the G string? You know what I'm saying? Or
I know.
I hate that. When those new guitars, those Gibson guitars came out with the auto tuners, I go, that's the way to go. But they were terrible. They were terrible guitars.
Yeah, when I recorded my last project, we did an EP at the Sugar Shack Studios here in London. with Eddie Pranskus on drums and Jim Corbett on bass, both of them from Thundermug. And Eddie played in my band for years. So we went in to do this project, and a friend of mine insisted that I play his Les Paul Standard in the studio. And so I took it in studio with me, and I could not keep it in tune.
Wow.
So while he was there, I said, I'm just going to use my telly for these bed tracks, and then I'll use your guitar for the lead parts later on. And then I actually brought his guitar to my tech and had it all set up. And for a couple of days, I could play it in tune. I went back in the studio with it. Could not keep it in tune. I ended up having to play those lead solos on a couple of studio guitars that they had there. You know, one of them was a Jaguar. Do you remember those? Fender Jaguar?
Oh, I love those Jaguars. Fender Jaguars, they look cool too. Fender Jaguars. They were known for like bands like they used to do all those instrumentals. You know what I mean? You know, Walk, Don't Run and all that. Those kind of bands would play. Yeah, the Ventures would play instrumentals. They were great guitars though.
Big, huge though. The thing was long. I wanted to ask you, with all the things that you've done over the years and so on, and you have been very, as we say, seminal or influential on other guitar players. Who were some of your main influences on guitar as you were just coming up?
It all started with me when the Beatles came out and you heard, you know, that Gretsch guitar or whatever, you know, you heard that. And then as I got into playing and learning songs, of course, then Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix influenced me a lot, you know, Jeff Beck, people like that, you know, and B.B. King, a real straight-ahead blues. So those are the people that influenced me when I was learning, you know what I mean? And then when bands like that came out, I started really listening to, you know, that's when I wanted to learn more theory and stuff because I found out that their music was way more advanced and I started learning classical guitar and doing things like that, you know? So I was influenced by different people. As it started, it was really basic, you know, the Beatles and things like that. And then as it progressed, you know, like the Claptons, Jimmy Page, all those, you know?
Right. Is there somebody out there today, one of the newer artists that really catches your ear?
I don't listen to much new artists. It's almost, there's so much stuff out there now that I honestly can't keep up. I'll hear something like on the radio and I'll like it, you know, for example. Even if I'm thinking, say, Canada, for example, like there's so many great bands in Canada. There's a band out here called Mother Mother. I don't know if you ever heard of them, you know? A friend of mine said, yeah, come and check out Mother Mother. And he's a younger guitar player, you know, but they've had, I think, 4 or 5 albums out now. And, you know, the guy's a great guitar player. He has his own thing. He sings and he plays and he does fabulous. But there's bands like that no one's even ever heard of that are very, very good. But I listen to the radio a lot, and there's no one that I say, gee, I really think that guy is amazing. There's so many of them. It's just too much.
Yeah, these days it's like a vast and endless sea of artists out there with the internet and all the streaming platforms. And the fact that, as we were kind of alluding to earlier, nowadays kids are recording entire albums on their laptops and uploading them to Spotify. Speaking of kids, do you have any advice that you would give to young up-and-coming guitar players today?
Well, you know, the advice I would give them is to not get blinded by all this stuff out there. Like, they just sort of throw all this stuff at you. Like, you could play fast guitar if you do this. You could play if you had this amp. You know, like, you know, Guitar Player magazine has, if you use this guitar and these kind of strings. And, you know, I wouldn't focus on none of that because bottom line is you have to put the effort into it yourself. You have to learn your notes and your scales, how chords work and how the scales work over the chords and things like that. And that's a slow and steady thing that you're going to have to do, you know. There's going to be no instant cure that's going to say, I'm going to be able to play this scale really fast. You have to start by playing it very, very slow and doing it very diligently, you know, attacking it and then pick up your speed, just like all those shredders do with the metronome. They start off and then it'll become second nature. Then you can start moving the metronome if that's what you want to do. If you understand that, then you can create your own thing. If you don't want to shred, you'll have musical knowledge that you can write your own songs and things like that,
Right. So basically what you're saying is don't be a fool. Go to school, go to the woodshed and put in the time and learn how to play your way and get good. It's been awesome talking to you, Frank. I don't want to take up your whole day here. I want to thank you once again for doing this with me today, and until next time, cheers.
Well, cheers. Nice talking to you, Tommy.
In all the years since I met Frank Soda back in the late 70s, I have yet to have an unpleasant conversation with this guy. He is one cool dude. Now, there's all kinds of classic Frank Soda out there on the internet. Yeah, if you search for Frank Soda, Soda Man, or Frank Soda and the Imps, it's all there. Now, I wanted to feature Frank in something that was more recent, so here is Jon Mykl Thor from his most recent project. This is Queen of the Spiders, featuring Frank Soda on lead guitar. Enjoy.
Silence is violence, aversion, a virgin disorder will bore her. She's calling, no warning. She stands into a Bowie song, the queen of the spiders. Sweet creature, I'll meet ya in Paris for pizza. You want me, you taunt me. I'm drawn to a fine, fine blue, also known as salty cedar, the queen of the spiders. She's a queen of the spiders. She's a queen of the spiders. There is so much venom inside her. She's a queen of the spiders. Yeah, yeah! She's dancing to a Bowie song, the queen of the spiders. Queen of the spiders. She's a queen of the spiders. She's a queen of the spiders. She's got so much venom inside her. She's a queen of the spiders. She's a queen of the spiders. Yeah. Beware, beware. You gotta beware. She's a queen of the spiders. Yeah. You got so much venom inside her. She's a queen of the spiders. It won't be long till she gets, oh yeah, so much venom inside.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including guest acquisition, recording, editing, and so on. And hey, if you like the show, why not subscribe and help support us through Patreon at patreon.com/TommySolo. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn. All rights reserved. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.